Good afternoon, members of the Cabinet, the management team, also to Councillors Kenny, Eve and Bates, who are attending and observing today. It's a big item, so on lots of items on the agenda, so we will crack on. Agenda item 1 is to receive declaration of interest from members in respect of any matter on the agenda. If you have one, could you please indicate and speak? I see none. Item 2 is to receive apologies for absence. We are all here. Agenda item 3 are the minutes of the previous Cabinet meeting held on the 26th of June 2023. Can I ask members of the Cabinet to agree by affirmation that they are a correct record?
Agreed.
Agreed? Thank you. Which moves us on to agenda item 4, to consider any items that the Chairman agrees to take as urgent business. I have none, which then leads us on to agenda item 5, temporary accommodation and the local authority housing fund. Councillors Kenny and Councillor Eves, you attend Cabinet to make observations. I don't know whether either of you have anything that you wish to say on this item. No? Okay, thank you. I'll then move to Simon Hughes to introduce this debate to us.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. Cabinet will be aware of the work that we do to meet our obligations, specifically to those households that are vulnerable and require housing support. This report refers specifically to our role in providing temporary accommodation. The purpose of temporary accommodation is set out in paragraph 9, and what it enables us to do simply is to provide a more effective service to vulnerable households where we can locate them in areas where they have existing communities, and that's particularly important for those people that are vulnerable, as most are when they're facing housing problems. It means that we can then focus on the work we need to do to provide them more permanent housing, and that again produces better outcomes for those families, their children. Financially, as set out in the background papers, this also makes good economic sense for the Council. It reduces the pressure on demand-led budgets, particularly around nightly paid accommodation, and enables us to manage that demand across the range of temporary accommodation that we have. Recommendations are set out in paragraph 8, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Yes, thank you, Simon. Can I invite a proposer and seconder? I think, Councillor Hobbs, this really falls into your domain, so if I could move to you, that would be good.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to propose this, and I have a few words to say. There is really an unavoidable reality that we're living in difficult times, with soaring mortgage rates, a scarcity of property for people to rent, our admirable support for those from the Ukraine and Afghanistan who have legally resettled here in the UK, and of course the cost of living crisis. They're all testing the resources of many councils across the country as families turn to us to help with temporary accommodation in their times of need. The financial burden placed, however, on district councils to support those who are homeless is a difficult challenge. We have seen here local to us or near to us in the last month, Hastings Borough Council announcing asset sales as they wrestle to fund over 1,000 families in temporary accommodation. And the Telegraph only yesterday reported that the London Borough of Newham is to spend £20 million buying private landlord property to avoid those tenants becoming homeless. Our district plan expects developers to provide 30% affordable housing, and in an active housing market, as we have, that means we have a flow of new property for social rent and for shared ownership purchase. Thankfully, at Mid Sussex, we clearly don't have homelessness issues that run to thousands of families. But we do have, at the moment, around 70 families who require temporary accommodation support at any one time. And whilst the cost of that support is one issue, the disruptiveness of moving families out of communities to bed and breakfast accommodation out of our area puts additional pressures on family groups where kids need the stability of school, for example, and their families and communities. Sadly, this number is growing and is expected to grow further through the winter. The officers at Mid Sussex do a lot of work upstream to help catch families before they fall, and we thank them for their work and the work of the Citizens Advice Bureau who run some of these services voluntarily for us. But the number requiring our help continues to grow. This council already owns 27 temporary accommodation properties across the district, and this proposal allows us to acquire more. The conditions of our use of the Local Authority Housing Fund have been negotiated by our team to provide strong support with the acquisition of 8 more units using LHAF1 and 4 more using LHAF2, taking our estate to 39 properties of different sizes, from 1 bedroom upwards. Whilst our own capital investment will be up to £3.08 million, this relieves pressure from our revenue budget from which bed and breakfast accommodation is paid, and the business case indicates a 5-year payback. We can make our investment using the cash reserves we hold and without borrowing. I'd like to thank the officers very much for their work in negotiating this package of support with the government.
Thank you, Councillor Hobbs. If I go to Councillor Gibson, who has housing in his brief, to second this.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'd like to start by thanking the officers for their work on this item. The availability of temporary accommodation is an important component of the overall housing stock that we have available, and Councillor Hobbs has already made the points about how important it is to keep families within communities. And certainly, over the past time that I've been a councillor, I have found where sort of households who have been moved out of their immediate areas, and it is more desirable to keep them in that. And I think it's also important to ensure that we have the right balance across this housing, and this work gives us the opportunity to do just that. I often receive calls from residents who point out to me empty properties. Often they are properties which are managed by our social housing provider, the housing associations. I will be working with the housing associations to look at the issues associated with the length of voids that happen when there is handover between tenants and or indeed when there is maintenance issues, as those seem to be on occasions just too long. And Mr. Hughes and I will be meeting with one of the housing associations in the near future in order to discuss that. I'm very pleased to see that the balance in terms of the number of bedrooms in each property is an important issue. And one of the problems that we have with the availability of housing in the area is the smaller number of the larger properties. And the extent to which this is going to be a challenge in the future will be something which this will give us the opportunity to look at. And yes, I will just conclude by saying that I recognise that sort of the sound financial position that we have at the moment that enables us to make this investment, and how that will enable us to support the revenue budget with lower bed and breakfast costs in the future. And this is clearly a very wise and sensible thing for this council to be doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Any other members wish to speak? Councillor Anne-Marie Cook.
Hello. Yes, I was just going to make a comment from the financial point of view, and I'm pleased to be able to say that we're in a position to take advantage of this scheme. It's the right and moral decision to provide good quality temporary accommodation, but the scheme also provides the district with a good value asset and reduces revenue expense and provides an income stream. So it ticks a lot of boxes, so I'm pleased to support it. Thank you.
Thank Thank you, Councillor Anne-Marie Cook. Just a couple of comments from me. I mean, it's important to stress that, that this is one of our key statutory responsibilities. So if people, residents in our community, present as homeless, we have a statutory responsibility to support them. I'm pleased that we're continuing this work of building our temporary housing stock, because I would like to think that all of us would regard the use of bed and breakfast accommodation, particularly out of area bed and breakfast accommodation, as something that we would want to avoid, and from a moral standpoint, would far rather have, unfortunate people who find themselves homeless rehoused in temporary accommodation before they can provide permanent accommodation. Temporary accommodation is one of the tools that we use. Obviously we have peaks and troughs in homelessness in the district. I'd also like to thank the Housing Options team for the way that they manage what is a very complex and emotional experience for residents who suddenly find themselves homeless. And I think, they, in difficult circumstances, they do a very good job. This is not just, morally right for us as a district and doing the right thing, but by our residents, but it also supports our financial position as an authority. So I thoroughly support it. If there are no more speakers, I'll just ask members to vote using their buttons. And that is carried unanimously. And we can now move to agenda item number 6, which is the financial outturn for 22-23. I don't know whether Councillors Kenny or Councillor Eaves wish to address us. Councillor Eaves.
Thank you, Councillor Eggleston. Yes, I had 3 things that I was concerned about reading the paperwork here. One is that in paras 16 to 18, we see reference to agency staff having been used, which involves greater expenditure. And I'm wondering whether we're outsourcing too much. I know we've outsourced the press service, for example. Is that a concern? Because it obviously costs more. Shall I rattle off my 3 questions? Yeah, okay. The second one was Budget Guidelines Note 62 is about the Ukrainian support specific reserve. According to paperwork, it says £5,000 has been used of £151,000. And I note from officers, thank you very much, you've updated this to say that as of now, it's actually £62,000 spent. I wonder what we're spending that on, because generally this is a West Sussex purview, so I don't quite see. And I know there's a massive amount of need there as some Ukrainians are trying to move into independent lives away from hosts. And thirdly, the St John's master plan is to be determined on page 30 of the capital programme. Is this because you're waiting to see how much is spent on the pavilion extension? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eaves. I think before we debate, if I go to Louise Duffield to answer those questions.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Eaves. So, as I updated before the meeting, in relation to agency staff, we've used agency staff in legal, which is a known and difficult market in local authority. And there were a number of changes over 2023 where we were recruiting into roles, the senior management restructure, so there was some covering of interims there. So that's a historic position, essentially. The point on the Ukrainian reserve, I'm going to take the first bit, which is the financial, and then perhaps come to Judy. As is going to be the point throughout outturn, this is a point in time at the 31st of March this year. And so just to make sure it's clear, there's actually 62,000 left, not 62,000 spent. And on the pavilion, know that they're unconnected, that the St John's work is master planning, that we're waiting for costs. And again, this was a point in time in terms of what we knew in March. Councillor Eggleston, I don't know if you wanted to, on the point about how the money's being spent, you might need to go to Judy.
Do you wish to add to it?
Okay, yes. Just to say that, as Louise has said, the report is a point in time, and to reassure members that we are constantly working with the local community, the voluntary sector, West Sussex County Council, to ensure that we're providing the appropriate support using the funds. The funds are indeed passported to the council from West Sussex County Council, and I can give you a flavour of what it's spent on, but it is specific to the Ukrainian guests in the district. So it's been transport, language classes, cafes, those sorts of facilities, very locally provided.
Thank you. Now, if I can go back to Louise Duffield to introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eggleston. So the financial outturn is, as I just indicated, a report that's issued at a point in time. It's a report that we're required to do, and it shows the position across the revenue outturn for last financial year and the status of a series of reserves, again, at that point in time. In terms of the overall situation, obviously it was a very challenging year, external circumstances in the economy last year. And the last report that was brought to Cabinet indicated that we were heading for an overspend of just over £1 million due to significant actions by officers that ultimately reduced to an overspend of £753,000. And at the same time, we had the positive benefit of interest rates in terms of our Treasury management income, which has allowed us to offset that. Therefore, overall, we have a positive position of £715,000, but we obviously know that future years are going to continue to be very challenging. Beyond that, I hope that the report is very detailed and hopefully easy to understand, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Louise. So to introduce and propose this item, can I go to Councillor Anne-Marie Cook?
Thank you. Yes, I would like to propose this and also have a few words to say beforehand. First of all, to thank Louise and Rachel and the finance team. We're pleased to see a positive outturn and to see it confirmed that inflationary pressures last year were successfully compensated for by intervention to cut costs, taking advantage of increased interest rates on financial assets, and congratulations on a successful Treasury management, taking advantage of the volatility in the markets. Not just to break even, we're also pleased to see that there is a surplus of £715,000 for last year, and that we are able to recommend to Council to carry forward into general reserves to offset against a shortfall forecast last winter for the financial year 2024-25, as the cumulative effects of inflation continue to add to costs, and also the impacts from government policy beyond our control on the distribution of business rates and government grants, which may well adversely impact us. So thank you for some good results.
Thank you, Councillor Anne-Marie Cook. I'm happy to second this item. I don't particularly want to say too much. This is dealing with the past, and it's good that the past was better than we had originally forecast. So that's very helpful. And it lays some of the groundwork for the work that we will kick off today, which is the following agenda item 7, on the budget guidelines and the work that we will carry out across the balance of the financial year as we move towards setting the next budget. We know that inflation is falling, but it's worth pointing out that just because inflation is falling, things don't actually get cheaper. They just don't get more. The costs don't increase at the same rate. So we will still face inflationary pressures during the course of this year, and some pressures, some real pressures in the budget. So we need to be mindful of that. On the other side, of course, and it depends on your point of view, whether you like the interest rates at the level they are at the moment, but they happen to be particularly helping us as a local authority. But the reality is that exceptional income from Treasury management is not going to continue forever. So we can't get used to generating 1.4, and I suspect this year something more than 1.4 million in Treasury management income. So we do have to consider very carefully, yes, how we use that exceptional income, but always be mindful of the fact that over a medium-term financial plan, that exceptional income is going to fall. So we shouldn't become reliant upon high levels of Treasury management income to support the budget, because at some point in time that element will diminish. It's a good result for 22-23. I'd like to thank all the officers for the work that they put in managing what is a difficult financial environment for us, coming in under the forecast deficit, and the spin of the wheel has meant that Treasury management is better than we would like to hope. We would have expected, but it puts us in a good position as we start the budget exercise for 24-25, and I look forward to that next item and working with members across the chamber on building a robust budget for next year and future years. So I'm happy to recommend. Anybody else in the team got anything to say? If not, then if we could move to a vote. And that's carried unanimously, which then moves us on to agenda item 7, which is the service and financial planning budget guidelines for 24-25. Councillors Kenny and Councillor Eves, anything to say? No, nothing. In which case I'll go to Louise Duffield to introduce this item.
Thank you, Councillor Eggleston. I'm not going to say too much on this item. It's a well-known process, but it's just to indicate the start of the budget setting, which will conclude early next year, and sets out a sort of a high-level picture of the context that we might be facing and some key factors to take into account. I'd also just note that things like government settlements are incredibly short notice, single year, and so we'll need to bear those in mind.
Thank you, and I'm going to go to Councillor Anne-Marie Cook to propose this item.
Hello again. Yes, I would like to propose this item. I have just a few comments to make, similar to previous point. This is step 1 in the long process for the 2024 budget and corporate plan, to be finalised by council agreement all the way off on the 28th of February 2024, having been through all the necessary drafts and scrutiny along the way. We are in volatile times regarding inflation and interest rates, which need to be accounted for, and have some great unknowns going forward on such items as business rates and new homes bonus. I believe that it is important to see maintenance of a prudent approach on these items. As a Cabinet, we have taken the decision to set up a cross-party working group to come up with an agreed budget across the chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anne-Marie Cook. I'm happy to second this item. Just wanted to re-emphasise the point that my colleague made, that our aim is to involve as many everyone across the chamber to look at the budget for next year, and have good engagement, and hopefully to come up with a set of proposals that we can all agree and support when we come to council that sets the budget, and this is the start of that journey. Any other members wish to comment? If not, let's then move to the vote. And that is also unanimous, which then brings us on to agenda item number 8, the Clare Hall update. Councillor Kenny and Councillor Eves, any comments? Councillor Kenny.
Hello, yes, I'd just like to speak in support of the report, which I very much approve of. Really like the direction that's been taken, particularly pleased by the policy of openness and consultation that's at the heart of the proposals. So yes, my full backing to that. I would like to urge upon officers and the Cabinet that we seek all possible synergies that there might be available to the town in going forward with the development, and I've written separately on that subject, so I won't go into it here, but I really hope that we can maximise the transformational capacity for the town when we carry out the Clare Hall redevelopment. That's it.
Thank you. Councillor Eves.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a question from Councillor Peter Chapman, who would love to attend these Cabinet meetings but can't because they've been brought forward in the day, so he's at work, so he apologises for that. He hasn't given me specific wording, so I'm hoping that I'm getting the thrust of this question right. He's asking how and when will the decision be taken between the District Council's Mixed-Use Model 3 plan and the community-led refurbishment plan, which we've seen on social media. Thank you.
Yes, so thank you to you both. Let me deal with both points without going to an officer yet. So, Councillor Kenny, on yours, so your question assumes the redevelopment of the site. Just like to say that we're not actually at that point yet. We still have some work to do. We will get proper advice. In an ideal world, you'd have landowners of adjacent sites working collaboratively and cooperatively together. And I think we'd all like that if possible. Unfortunately, we don't always live in an ideal world. But mindful of your comments. On Councillor Eves, your point on behalf of Councillor Chapman, I think you'll see as we move into the debate, because I have an amendment which I'm proposing that it deals with Councillor Chapman's issue, maybe not as precisely as he would like, but hopefully gives him comfort and people possibly watching on the live stream comfort about how we're approaching this issue. Thank you. If I could now go to Louise Duffield to introduce this item.
Thank you, Councillor Eggleston. Yes, so this report sets out the significant work that has been done to collect evidence on the best option for the future of the Clare Hall building. The decisions that we take around this building will affect generations to come, and it is important that we are evidence-led and we make the right decision for the whole community. I think at the time of writing, we were very clear to invite community proposals, and as Councillor Eggleston has indicated, things might have moved forward a little bit since the publication of this report, which no doubt your debate will take into account. I thank Councillor Kenny for his comments on engagement. I think most of us in this room spent quite a lot of time meeting people and discussing Clare Hall with the community, which I think was a fantastic opportunity. And as we go forward, we'll be doing more to make sure that we reach all elements of the Haywards Heath community as we move through the next phases. So I think on the basis of your proposed amendments, I'll leave it there, Councillor Eggleston.
Thank you, Louise. So yes, if I may, before moving to the proposer of the motion, if I could just set out the amendment for for Cabinet and observers and people on the live stream. So the amendment is firstly to proposal number 1, the insertion of the words subject to little 4 and little 5 below, recommends to council in principle, etc. And then little 4, I'm proposing is amended to read as follows: agrees that officers should request and assess the viability of any alternative community proposals in presenting their conclusions to the Cabinet and Executive Steering Group for consideration. Cabinet and the Executive Steering Group may request that any community bidders give a formal presentation to them so that their plan can be tested. And then the additional item 5 in the recommendations agrees to wait until Cabinet and the Executive Steering Group has duly and properly considered over a reasonably prompt timescale any community proposals before proceeding with any procurement. I appreciate there are quite a few words there, but I hope everybody got the gist of it. It will, of course, be reflected in the minutes. If I could, I know our Cabinet will want to talk on this subject at some length. If I could just add some context here. We're trying to do the right thing by everyone. We've taken a lot of professional advice. O'Garden Partners are extremely experienced in this field, and they have come up with a set of recommendations and proposals for us to consider. And as people will know, we've started a work of consultation on that, on their work. But we are mindful that there are others in the community who have a different view on a way forward, and we want to give anybody who wants to put forward a community proposal, we want to give them the appropriate space and time to enable us to consider it and test their work. And I say that and we mean that we intend to do that in an open and honest way. So we haven't closed our minds to anything. We have a preferred route that we like, but we haven't closed our minds, and we will give a community bid due and proper consideration, but it has to be something that is viable and stands up to rigorous assessment. And hopefully this amendment will provide that reassurance and give us all the space in which to look at what is a very complex project with a number of major significant hurdles in the way of bringing it to fulfilment. Hopefully this amendment gives everybody the opportunity to have their input into it. I now propose to go to Councillor Anne-Marie Cook.
Thank you, Leader, and I'm pleased to support your amendment. It makes a lot of sense, and to reiterate your words of commitment to giving proper review of any community proposal. Thank you, Louise, and your team, and to everyone who prepared for and attended the drop-in sessions to view the work done to date by the Council and see a vision for the Clare Hall site. We all spoke at length to many residents of varying views as to what the future of Clare Hall might be. The consensus that Haywards Heath needs and deserves a cultural and community venue with space for live entertainment on this site was clear. As well, that the building should be exclusively a community and cultural venue. As already said, officers remain open to and look forward to hearing proposals and detail from the community about the refurbishment alternative. And we encourage officers to continue at pace on both options. We propose shortly to establish a party steering group, which will enable member input. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could now go to councillor Chris Hobbs to second.
Thank you. I'm happy to second the proposal. I also attended the 2 Clare Hall Open Days, and I thank both the members of the public who've had, I thank the members of the public, not both of them, all of them, who have attended and shared their views at those sessions, and also the officers. And I will continue, and we will continue to accept and understand their views over the coming weeks. The slides put together by our officers and our specialists answer a number of questions, and of course for some members of the public raise a number of questions. We're committed to running a clear public process, and we look forward to receiving any feedback and any alternative proposals that are financially viable, deliverable, and provide a cultural and community venue solution for Mid-Sussex.
Thank you, councillor Hobbs. Any other members of the Cabinet wish to speak? Councillor Alison Bennett.
Thank you, Councillor Eggleston. Within the remit of the communities portfolio that I hold, I just wanted to emphasise this Cabinet's absolute commitment to transparency and collaboration with the community and across the Council chamber. We've already begun to take a number of steps to demonstrate that this is our intent. It is seen, for example, by how we've reached out to key stakeholders this summer, and thanks must go to Louise Duffield for the time and effort she's put into making that happen. The exhibitions that were really well attended were held in Clare Hall itself. That's the first time this council has opened up the hall to the public, apart from for its use by the NHS as a vaccination centre since the hall was closed. I think that is really genuinely significant. And we are really keen to see the alternative community proposals in full. We've seen and digested what's been published on social media over the weekend, and we're grateful for sight of that, but we're interested in having meaningful conversations about the detail underneath that. And then finally, in terms of how we as a council progress with Clare Hall, today this decision that we're going to take is going to set up a politically balanced steering group. The previous steering group wasn't politically balanced. So I'm hoping that both councillors and members of the public can see that things are working differently under this new administration. And I hope you believe us when we say that we're very genuine in how we're going about that. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Bennett. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to bring a slightly different perspective in the north of the district. I would admit that I think I visited Clare Hall on one occasion for an event, and I attended the first of the sessions, and I was struck by both the large number of the public that actually attended and also their enthusiasm for the concept and their willingness certainly to consider what the council is proposing at the moment. And just to make the point that that heartened me, that this is certainly something which we can work towards a positive outcome with the community. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Gibson. So if there's nothing more, may we move to the recommendations as amended. And that is also carried unanimously, which moves us to agenda item 9, which is to consider whether to exclude the press and public from the meeting during consideration of the following items in accordance with section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972 on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the said act. If we could just vote by affirmation rather than buttons. Just say agreed. Agreed. Thank you. Yep. So welcome back, everyone. We've concluded the meeting. We considered in the exempt session 3 items. I'll just briefly say, just for the public record, what they were. One was looking at our IT cloud procurement. Second was a revenue and benefit printing solution, and the third was again a printing solution for our electoral roll management. That's what those 3 items were. There are no more agenda items, so I draw this Cabinet meeting to a close. Thank you very much, and thank you to the members of the public for tuning in.